My name is Rebecca Torres. I am 45 years old. I am a brigadier general in the United States Army. But to my family, none of that ever mattered. To them, I was the absent mother, the selfish career woman, the one who chose duty over family. I was the one they whispered about behind closed doors, the one they banned from my own daughter's high school graduation. Because in their eyes, I had abandoned what mattered most. I still remember standing in the parking lot of Westfield High School that warm June morning, watching through chain-link fencing as families streamed toward the auditorium in their Sunday best. My own blood, my parents, my siblings, even my ex-husband, they were all inside. I wasn't allowed to enter. I wasn't wanted. I stood there in my dress uniform, hands steady at my sides, watching through tinted windows as they took their seats in the reserved family section. I wasn't invited to celebrate. I wasn't allowed to witness the moment I had been waiting 18 years to see. All because I had failed them as a mother. At least that's what they told themselves. They had no idea who I really was, no idea what I had sacrificed, no idea what was about to happen. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. I was never supposed to be the problem child. In the sprawling suburban neighborhood of Maple Creek, California, the Torres family was known for producing teachers, nurses, and devoted mothers. We were the family that hosted block parties, organized church bake sales, and never missed a Little League game. My mother, Elena Torres, was the epitome of domestic perfection. My father, Robert, managed the local hardware store and coached youth soccer on weekends. My older sister, Carmen, followed the script perfectly. She married her high school sweetheart at 22, had her first child by 24, and settled into a beautiful colonial house 3 blocks from where we grew up. My younger brother, Diego, became a firefighter, married a kindergarten teacher, and gave my parents the grandchildren they could spoil every weekend. Then there was me, Rebecca, the middle child who never quite fit the mold they had cast for our family. From the earliest age I can remember, I was drawn to things that made my mother uncomfortable. While Carmen played with dolls and practiced braiding hair, I collected toy soldiers and built elaborate fortresses in the backyard. When other girls my age were learning to bake cookies with their mothers, I was reading books about Joan of Arc and asking my father to teach me how to change a tire. The differences were small at first. My parents would exchange glances across the dinner table when I talked about wanting to join the debate team instead of cheerleading. They would gently steer conversations away from my fascination with military history and toward more appropriate interests for a young lady. But I persisted. In high school, while Carmen was homecoming queen and Diego was captain of the soccer team, I was president of the Model United Nations Club and captain of the academic decathlon team. I excelled in subjects that required strategy and critical thinking. I thrived in competitive environments where success was measured by merit rather than popularity. My parents attended my academic competitions with the same resigned politeness they might show at a distant relative's recital. They clapped when I won, but their smiles never quite reached their eyes. I could see the questions in their expressions. Why couldn't I be more like Carmen? Why couldn't I want the things normal girls wanted? The first real crack in our family foundation came during my senior year of high school. I had been accepted to Stanford University with a full academic scholarship, but I also received an appointment to the United States Military Academy at West Point. When I announced at Sunday dinner that I was choosing West Point over Stanford, the silence that followed was deafening. My mother set down her fork with trembling hands. My father stared at his plate as if it might provide answers. Carmen looked horrified. Diego, only 15 at the time, was the first to speak. But what about getting married? What about having kids? The question hung in the air like smoke. It crystallized everything my family couldn't understand about me. In their world, a woman's highest achievement was creating a beautiful home and raising well-adjusted children. Military service was something men did before settling down, not something daughters built their lives around. I tried to explain. I talked about serving something greater than myself, about the honor of protecting our country, about leadership opportunities, and the chance to make a real difference in the world. But with every word I spoke, I watched their faces grow more distant. more disappointed. My mother excused herself from the table and didn't speak to me for 3 days. The months that followed were tense and painful. My parents went through the motions of supporting my decision in public, but privately they made their disapproval clear. They attended my high school graduation but left immediately after the ceremony. They didn't throw me a party or help me shop for college supplies. When I left for West Point in late June, only Diego came to see me off at the airport. Those 4 years at the academy were transformative. I discovered a world where my natural leadership abilities were not just accepted, but celebrated. I found mentors who saw potential in me that my own family had never recognized. I excelled academically and graduated in the top 10% of my class. But the distance between my family and me only grew wider with each passing year. I invited them to my graduation from West Point. They didn't come. I sent them photos from my commissioning ceremony as a second lieutenant. They never responded. When I called home, conversations were brief and awkward, filled with long pauses and carefully neutral responses to my stories about military life. It was during my first deployment to Germany that I met Marcus Webb, a fellow Army officer who understood the demands of military life because he lived them too. We fell in love in the way that only soldiers can, quickly and intensely, knowing that time together was precious and unpredictable. When I brought Marcus home to meet my family during a brief leave, I thought maybe things would change. He was everything they should have wanted for me. Intelligent, respectful, from a good family in Ohio. But even Marcus couldn't bridge the gulf that had opened between my family and me. The wedding was small. My parents attended, but they sat stiffly through the ceremony, their smiles forced, and their congratulations hollow. Carmen was my maid of honor, but she spent most of the reception avoiding eye contact with me. It was clear that in their minds, I wasn't starting a family. I was continuing down a path that led away from everything they valued. When Sophia was born 2 years later, I thought surely becoming a grandmother would soften my mother's heart. I was stationed at Fort Bragg then, and I flew home with my 2-month-old daughter, hoping that the sight of her first granddaughter would remind my mother why family was supposed to matter more than career choices. The visit was a disaster. My mother held Sophia politely but without warmth. She made pointed comments about how difficult it must be to raise a child while, quote. She questioned whether I was breastfeeding enough, whether the base housing was safe, whether I was really prepared for the responsibilities of motherhood. When Sophia started crying during one particularly tense conversation, my mother looked at me with barely concealed disdain and said, "Some women just aren't natural mothers, Rebecca. There's no shame in admitting you made a mistake." I left the next morning, earlier than planned, and didn't return home for 2 years. The pattern was established. I would make overtures, extend invitations, share photos and stories about my growing career and my beautiful daughter. They would respond with polite distance, subtle criticism, and the persistent suggestion that I had chosen the wrong life. When Marcus and I divorced after 8 years of marriage, strained by the demands of dual military careers and multiple deployments, my family's response was predictable. My mother's voice on the phone was cold but unsurprised. "I hope you're finally ready to think about what's best for that little girl," she said. But I wasn't ready to give up. I was ready to fight harder than ever for the life I had chosen and the daughter who depended on me to show her that women could be strong, independent, and successful on their own terms. Single motherhood in the military is a unique challenge that few people truly understand. After Marcus and I divorced, I was stationed at Fort Campbell in Kentucky, raising Sophia while advancing through the ranks in one of the most demanding career fields in the world. The custody arrangement was complicated by geography and deployment schedules, but I was determined to prove that I could be both an exceptional officer and a devoted mother. Sophia was 8 years old when I made captain, and she understood military life in ways that most children never have to. She knew the difference between dress blues and ACUs. She could identify rank insignia before she could tie her own shoes. When other kids complained about their parents being late to pick them up from school, Sophia knew that sometimes mommy's meetings with colonels ran long, and that was just part of life. The base housing we lived in was small but comfortable. I had painted Sophia's room a soft lavender and filled it with books, art supplies, and a growing collection of science kits that fed her curious mind. Our neighbors were mostly military families, who understood the rhythm of our lives, the sudden departures, the long hours, the way we celebrated homecomings and prepared for goodbyes. But to my family back in California, our life looked chaotic and unstable. My mother would call on Sunday evenings, and her questions always carried the same underlying criticism. Is Sophia eating enough vegetables? Are you reading to her every night? Does she have friends her own age? When was the last time she saw her father? I would answer patiently, describing Sophia's honor roll achievements, her participation in the base youth soccer league, her growing interest in astronomy. But I could hear the disapproval in my mother's silences, the way she would change the subject when I mentioned my own professional accomplishments. When I was promoted to major, I called home to share the news. My father's response was polite but distant. "That's nice, Rebecca. Your sister Carmen just found out she's pregnant with her third child. Maybe you could send her a card." The message was clear. Carmen's expanding family was real news. My military promotions were just career updates that took time away from what really mattered. The breaking point came during Sophia's 10th birthday. I had planned a party at our house on base, inviting her classmates and their families. I had spent weeks organizing everything, from the decorations to the cake, wanting to create something special for my daughter despite being in the middle of intense training exercises. I invited my parents, my siblings, even Marcus's parents, hoping that Sophia's milestone birthday might be important enough to bridge the distance that had grown between us. Marcus flew in from his new posting in Colorado. Carmen and Diego said they couldn't afford the trip from California. My parents said they would try to make it, but couldn't promise anything. The party was wonderful. Sophia's face glowed as her friends sang happy birthday. She made a wish over 10 flickering candles and blew them out with the kind of pure joy that makes every sacrifice worthwhile. Her friends from base housing came, along with several of my fellow officers and their families. We had games, laughter, and the kind of chaos that comes with a dozen 10-year-olds hopping up on a birthday cake. But my family wasn't there. They didn't call. They didn't send cards or gifts. It was as if Sophia's birthday existed in a parallel universe that they couldn't be bothered to acknowledge. That night, after the guests had gone home and Sophia was asleep clutching her new telescope, I sat alone in our small living room and made a decision. I was done trying to earn their approval. I was done apologizing for the life I had chosen. My daughter and I were building something beautiful together, with or without their blessing. The years that followed were some of the most challenging and rewarding of my career. I was deployed to Afghanistan for a year-long tour when Sophia was 12, leaving her in the capable care of Marcus, who had been transferred back to Kentucky. The separation was agonizing, but I knew I was serving something greater than myself, protecting the freedoms that allowed my daughter to grow up safe and free. I video called Sophia every day that the internet connection allowed. I watched her science fair presentations from a dusty forward operating base. I helped her with homework via satellite phone. When she made the honor roll, I celebrated from 7,000 miles away, my pride echoing across continents. My family's reaction to the deployment was predictable. My mother left a voicemail that I listened to 3 weeks after she sent it, the delay caused by operational security restrictions. "I don't understand how you can leave that little girl," her voice said, thin and disappointed. "A mother's place is with her children, Rebecca. Some things are more important than playing soldier." Playing soldier. After 15 years of military service, after leading troops in combat, after making life-and-death decisions in the defense of our nation, my mother still saw my career as an elaborate game that kept me from my real responsibilities. But Sophia saw things differently. When I returned from deployment, she had grown 3 inches and gained a maturity that amazed me. She had kept a journal of our phone calls, documenting not just what we talked about, but how she felt about having a mother who was willing to serve in dangerous places to protect others. "I'm proud of you, Mom," she said on the drive home from the airport. "Mrs. Patterson says not all moms are brave enough to be soldiers. She says you're a hero." Mrs. Patterson was her 6th grade teacher, a veteran's wife who understood military families. While my own mother questioned my choices, this woman I barely knew was helping my daughter understand the honor in service. By the time Sophia entered high school, I had been promoted to lieutenant colonel and was stationed at the Pentagon. The move to Virginia was bittersweet, closer to the centers of military power, but further from the base communities that had become our extended family. Sophia adapted to civilian high school with the same resilience she had learned as a military child. She joined the debate team, excelled in advanced placement courses, and developed a passion for international relations that made me burst with pride. She talked about wanting to study political science, maybe even following in my footsteps to West Point, or pursuing a career in diplomacy. My family's response to her academic achievements was typically lukewarm. When Sophia made the varsity debate team as a sophomore, my mother's comment was, "That's nice, dear. Just make sure all that arguing doesn't make her too aggressive. Boys don't like pushy girls." I watched my brilliant, articulate daughter's face fall slightly at her grandmother's words, and I felt a familiar anger rise in my chest. This was the same dismissiveness I had faced my entire life, now being directed at the next generation. But Sophia was stronger than I had been at her age. She looked her grandmother in the eye and said, "I'm not trying to impress boys, Grandma. I'm trying to change the world." During Sophia's junior year, I received orders for a promotion to colonel and a new assignment that would take us to Germany for 3 years. It was an incredible opportunity, a chance to command at the brigade level and work in NATO operations. But it would mean Sophia finishing high school overseas, away from the friends she had made in Virginia. We talked about it for hours, weighing the pros and cons. Sophia was practical about the decision, in the way that military children learn to be. She researched the American school in Stuttgart, looked into their debate program, and even started learning basic German phrases. "We've moved before, Mom," she said with a maturity that humbled me, "and this sounds like an amazing opportunity for your career. We'll make it work." But when I called my family to share the news of my promotion and upcoming assignment, the response was harsh and immediate. "You're uprooting that poor girl again," my mother said, her voice sharp with disapproval. "She's in her junior year, Rebecca. These are the most important years for college preparation. How can you be so selfish?" My father was even more direct. "At what point do you stop chasing these military fantasies and start thinking about your daughter's future? She needs stability, not another country to adjust to." Carmen, who had never lived more than 50 miles from her childhood home, chimed in during a family conference call that quickly became an intervention. "Sophia should come live with us for her senior year," she announced. "She can finish high school properly, in a stable environment, with a family who actually puts her first." The implication was clear and devastating. I didn't put my daughter first. I was a selfish career woman who dragged her child around the world for my own ambition. I was failing as a mother because I had chosen duty over domesticity. That night, I found Sophia in her room, quietly doing homework at her desk. I knocked on the doorframe and sat on the edge of her bed. "What would you think about staying with Aunt Carmen for your senior year?" I asked carefully. Sophia looked up from her calculus textbook, her expression serious. "Is that what you want?" "I want what's best for you." She was quiet for a long moment, then set down her pencil and turned to face me fully. "Mom, you've spent my entire life showing me that women can be strong, independent, and successful. You've taught me that we don't have to choose between caring for our families and pursuing our dreams. You've proven that mothers can be heroes too." She paused, and when she continued, her voice was steady and sure. "If you think I'm going to abandon you now to live with people who don't respect what you've accomplished, you don't know your own daughter very well." We went to Germany together. And it was there, in a small American high school outside Stuttgart, that Sophia began to shine in ways that would soon leave my entire family speechless. The move to Germany was supposed to be a fresh start for both Sophia and me, but it became the catalyst for the final breakdown of my relationship with my family. Stuttgart American High School was a small, close-knit community where military children from around the world came together to finish their education. Sophia thrived in this environment, but every achievement she earned seemed to deepen the chasm between my family and me. Within her first semester, Sophia had not only adapted to the new school, but had become a standout student. She joined the Model United Nations team, became editor of the school newspaper, and was recruited for the varsity tennis team, despite never having played competitively before. Her grades were impeccable, Her teachers raved about her maturity and insight, and she had formed friendships with students whose parents served in embassies and military commands across Europe. But when I called home to share these accomplishments, my family's responses were always filtered through their belief that I was depriving Sophia of a normal American teenage experience. "That's nice that she's keeping busy," my mother would say, her tone suggesting that busy work was no substitute for real community involvement. "But what about homecoming? What about prom planning? Is she dating anyone nice?" It didn't matter that Sophia had organized a school-wide fundraiser for Syrian refugees, or that she was fluent in 3 languages by her senior year. In my family's eyes, she was missing out on the quintessential American high school experience because of my selfish career choices. The breaking point came during what should have been a celebration. In February of Sophia's senior year, she received early admission to Harvard University with a full academic scholarship. The acceptance letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, and I found her in the kitchen, staring at the Harvard letterhead with tears streaming down her face. "I got in, Mom," she whispered. "I actually got in." I held her as she cried, understanding that these weren't just tears of joy but tears of relief. For all her confidence and maturity, she had carried the weight of wondering whether our unconventional life had somehow disadvantaged her academically. The Harvard acceptance was validation that she had not just survived but excelled despite the challenges. We celebrated that night with champagne for me and sparkling cider for her, toasting to the future in our small apartment overlooking the German countryside. I was so proud I could barely contain myself. My daughter, raised in military housing and overseas schools, had earned admission to one of the world's most prestigious universities. When I called my family to share the news, expecting that surely this achievement would unite us in celebration, their response was devastating. My father answered the phone, and I could hear the television in the background, the familiar sounds of Sunday afternoon football that had been the soundtrack to my childhood. "Dad, I have incredible news," I began, unable to keep the excitement out of my voice. "Sophia got into Harvard. Full scholarship." There was a pause, then a muffled conversation as he covered the phone to tell my mother. When he came back on the line, his voice was flat. That's quite an accomplishment," he said. "But Rebecca, we need to talk about something more important. Your mother and I have been discussing this, and we think Sophia should come home for graduation. She should graduate with American kids, in an American ceremony, surrounded by family who can actually be there for her." The words hit me like cold water. "She's graduating with American kids, Dad, and I'll be there for her." "You know what I mean," he said, and I could hear my mother's voice prompting him in the background. "She should have a proper graduation, with grandparents and aunts and uncles in the audience. She should have graduation parties and college send-offs like normal kids do. This military life has already cost her enough." I felt my hand tighten around the phone. "Cost her enough? She just got into Harvard, Dad. How has anything cost her?" "Don't be naive, Rebecca." It was my mother's voice now. She had taken the phone from my father. "That girl has been dragged all over the world, forced to adapt to new schools and new countries every few years. She's never had a stable friend group, never had a proper relationship, never experienced what normal teenage girls experience. And now she's graduating in some foreign country with strangers in the audience. Those strangers are her friends and teachers who have watched her achieve incredible things," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "And I'm not a stranger, I'm her mother." "You're her mother when it's convenient," my mother shot back. "When you're not deployed or training or playing politics with generals. That girl needs a real family around her for the most important moment of her high school career." The conversation spiraled from there. My mother outlined a plan they had apparently been developing for weeks. Sophia would fly back to California 2 weeks before graduation. They would organize a proper graduation party with extended family and family friends. She would walk across the stage at a, quote, real American high school. They had somehow arranged for her to participate in Carmen's daughter's graduation ceremony as an honorary graduate. "We've already talked to Carmen about hosting her," my mother continued. "We can give Sophia the send-off to college that she deserves, surrounded by people who love her and want to celebrate her properly." What they were really saying was clear. I wasn't enough. My presence at her graduation wasn't enough. The community we had built in Germany wasn't enough. The pride I felt in her achievements wasn't enough to compensate for what they saw as a lifetime of poor mothering choices. When I hung up the phone, I sat in our small living room for a long time, staring out at the German countryside and feeling more alone than I had since my early days as a single mother. I thought about their proposal, about whether maybe they were right. Maybe Sophia did deserve something more traditional, more stable, more recognizably American than what I could offer her. That evening, when Sophia came home from tennis practice, glowing with the kind of confidence that comes from a day well lived, I found myself studying her face. Did she look deprived? Did she seem like she was missing something essential? "Mom, you look weird," she said, dropping her tennis bag by the door. "Are you okay?" I told her about the phone call, about my family's proposal. I tried to present it neutrally, as an option rather than a judgment. But Sophia was too perceptive to miss the underlying tension. She listened in silence, her expression growing more serious with each detail. When I finished, she sat back in her chair and looked at me with the same steady gaze that had gotten her through every transition, every challenge, every new beginning we had faced together. "Mom," she said slowly, "do you want me to go to California for graduation?" "I want you to have what you want," I said honestly. "What I want," she said, her voice gaining strength, "is to graduate from the school where I've spent my senior year, surrounded by the friends who know me and the teachers who've helped me get into Harvard. What I want is to have my mother there, the woman who sacrificed and worked and showed me every day that women can be anything they choose to be." She paused, and when she continued, there was steel in her voice that reminded me of myself at her age. "What I don't want is to be part of some performance designed to make Grandma and Grandpa feel better about decisions they've never understood. I'm not going to pretend that our life has been a mistake just to give them the graduation fantasy they think I should want." I felt tears pricking my eyes. "Are you sure? They're your family too, and they do love you." "They love the idea of who they think I should be," she said. "But you love who I actually am, and Mom, I like who I am. I like the person our life has helped me become. I'm not ashamed of being a military kid, and I'm not ashamed of having a mother who chose service over sitting in PTA meetings." That night I called my mother back to tell her that Sophia had chosen to graduate in Germany. The conversation was brief and brutal. "I see," my mother said, her voice ice cold. "Well, I suppose we shouldn't be surprised. You've raised her to be just as selfish as you are." "She's not selfish," I said quietly. "She's loyal. There's a difference." "Loyal to someone who's never put her first," my mother replied. "Don't expect us to celebrate this decision, Rebecca. Don't expect us to pretend that we approve of the way you've handled any of this." "I'm not asking for your approval," I said. "I'm just hoping that someday you might try to understand that Sophia and I have built something beautiful together, even if it doesn't look like what you wanted for us." My mother's laugh was bitter. "Beautiful? That child is graduating in a foreign country with no family in the audience, except the mother who spent her entire childhood putting her own career first. If that's your definition of beautiful, then I feel sorry for both of you." She hung up before I could respond. The weeks that followed were filled with silence from California. No calls, no cards congratulating Sophia on Harvard, no acknowledgement that graduation season was approaching. It was as if by choosing to graduate in Germany, Sophia had ceased to exist in their world. But our world in Stuttgart was buzzing with excitement. Sophia's teachers were organizing special recognition ceremonies for students attending elite universities. Her friends were planning graduation parties that would celebrate not just the end of high school, but the international community they had all been part of. The local military community was preparing to honor the children of service members who had excelled academically while their parents served overseas. As graduation day approached, I could feel the weight of my family's absence, like a physical ache. For 18 years, I had convinced myself that their approval didn't matter, that Sophia and I were enough for each other. But facing the biggest celebration of my daughter's young life with empty seats where her grandparents should have been sitting was harder than I had expected. 3 days before graduation, my phone rang. It was Carmen. "Rebecca," she said, her voice tight with barely controlled anger, "I need you to understand something. When Sophia starts at Harvard in the fall, when she needs support and guidance and someone to talk to about the challenges of college life, don't expect her to call us. Don't expect any of us to be there for her when your military lifestyle finally catches up to both of you." "What do you mean?" I asked, though I was afraid I already knew. "I mean, we're done," Carmen said. "We've spent 18 years watching you drag that child around the world, making excuses for why family doesn't matter, why tradition doesn't matter, why stability doesn't matter. We tried to give you both one last chance to do something right, to give Sophia a proper graduation with proper family support. But you've made your choice and now we're making ours." The line went dead, and I realized that my family had just formally disowned both my daughter and me. On the most important weekend of Sophia's young life, we would be completely and utterly alone. But as I sat there holding the silent phone, I realized something else. We had been alone for years already. We had just been too hopeful to see it clearly. What I didn't know was that my family's rejection had set in motion a chain of events that would change everything. While I was dealing with the pain of their ultimatum, Sophia was quietly orchestrating something that would expose the truth about our lives in ways I never could have imagined. It started with a phone call I wasn't supposed to overhear. I was in my home office, finishing up some paperwork for an upcoming NATO exercise, when I heard Sophia on the phone in her room. Her voice was unusually formal, and something in her tone made me pause. "Yes, sir, I understand the protocol," she was saying. "But I think you should know what's really been happening. My mother doesn't talk about it because she's too proud. But I think people should understand what military families actually sacrifice." I moved closer to her door, curious about who she was speaking to with such serious formality. She's never missed a parent-teacher conference, even when she had to attend by video call from a forward operating base in Afghanistan. She's never missed a birthday, even when she had to celebrate by sending a care package with my favorite cookies from 7,000 miles away. And sir, she's never once made me feel like her career was more important than I was. There was a long pause, and I could hear her voice growing stronger, more passionate. "What I'm asking for isn't a favor. It's recognition of something that should have been recognized a long time ago. My mother has served this country for 22 years while raising me as a single parent. She's commanded troops in combat while helping me with algebra homework over satellite phone. She's been promoted to Brigadier General while never missing a single important moment in my life." Brigadier General. My heart stopped. I had received confirmation of my promotion just a week earlier, but it hadn't been announced yet. The ceremony was scheduled for after graduation, and I hadn't even told Sophia about the new rank. How did she know? "Yes, sir," she continued. "I believe this story needs to be told, not just for my mother, but for all the military parents who sacrifice every day while their children watch and learn what real service looks like." When she hung up, I knocked softly on her door. She looked up from her desk, where she had been working on what appeared to be her valedictorian speech, and her expression was both guilty and determined. "Mom, I need to tell you something," she said. "Sophia, who were you just talking to?" She took a deep breath. "A reporter from Stars and Stripes. And before you get upset, please let me explain." Stars and Stripes was the military newspaper, read by service members and their families around the world. The idea that our personal story might be featured there made me feel exposed and vulnerable in ways that combat never had. "How do you even know about my promotion?" I asked, sitting on the edge of her bed. "Mrs. Henderson in the admin office is married to Colonel Henderson from your command," Sophia said with a slight smile. "Military communities aren't that big, Mom. When a single mother gets promoted to general, people notice. They talk about it. They're proud of it." She was right. The military community had been quietly celebrating my promotion in ways my biological family never had. Fellow officers' wives had been sending congratulations. Other military children had been telling Sophia how cool it was that her mom was becoming a general. The base community that had raised us both was treating this achievement as the major milestone it was. "But why did you call a reporter?" I asked. Sophia's expression grew serious. "Because I'm valedictorian, Mom. I have to give a speech at graduation. And I've been thinking about what I want to say, about what message I want to leave with my classmates and their families." She pulled out a notebook filled with handwritten pages. "Most valedictorian speeches talk about the future, about dreams and potential and all the things we might accomplish. But I want to talk about something different. I want to talk about the heroes who are already sitting in the audience. The parents who've served while raising us. The mothers and fathers who've shown us what sacrifice and dedication really look like. I felt my throat tighten as she continued. I want to talk about you, Mom, specifically you. Not as my mother, but as an example of what's possible when someone chooses both service and family. When someone refuses to accept that you can't have both excellence in your career and excellence as a parent. Sophia, I said quietly, our family is going to see this. If this story runs in Stars and Stripes, if you give a speech like that, they're going to know exactly what you're saying about them. Good, she said, and there was steel in her voice that reminded me of myself. Maybe it's time someone told the truth about what we've actually accomplished together. Maybe it's time someone pointed out that their definition of good mothering is pretty narrow if it doesn't include raising a daughter who got into Harvard while serving her country with honor. Over the next few days, I watched Sophia work on her speech with an intensity I had never seen before. She researched statistics about military families, about single mothers in the armed forces, about the challenges and achievements of children who grew up in military communities. She interviewed other students whose parents had served, collecting stories of sacrifice and strength that painted a picture of military life that was far more complex and beautiful than the narrative my family had always pushed. She also did something that surprised me. She reached out to my former colleagues and commanding officers, asking them to share their perspectives on my service and leadership. She contacted Major Patricia Yamamoto, who had served under my command in Afghanistan. She spoke with Colonel James Wright, who had been my mentor during my early years as a field officer. She even managed to get in touch with General Susan Morrison, who had been one of the few female generals in the Army when I was coming up through the ranks. I want people to understand, Sophia explained when I asked her why she was going to such lengths, that when you chose military service, you weren't abandoning motherhood. You were showing me what motherhood could look like when it's combined with purpose and principle. The reporter from Stars and Stripes, Staff Sergeant Maria Lopez, came to interview us 3 days before graduation. She was a young journalist who had grown up as a military child herself, and she understood immediately what Sophia was trying to accomplish. This is really about redefining success in military families, she said after hearing our story. So often the narrative is about what military children lose or miss out on. But your daughter is talking about what she's gained. The interview process was emotional for both of us. Sophia spoke eloquently about the lessons she had learned from watching me balance command responsibilities with parenting. She talked about the strength she had developed from moving frequently, the independence she had gained from having to adapt to new situations, the global perspective she had acquired from living in different countries. But it was when Staff Sergeant Lopez asked about our current situation with my family that the full scope of what we were dealing with became clear. They see my mother's career as a series of selfish choices, Sophia said simply. They've never understood that serving your country while raising a family isn't selfish. It's actually the opposite. It's showing your child that there are things worth sacrificing for, causes worth dedicating your life to, principles worth upholding, even when it's difficult. And now they're not coming to your graduation? Lopez asked. They were never really coming, Sophia replied. They've been absent for most of the important moments in our lives. The only difference now is that they're being honest about it. After the interview, Lopez asked if she could attend the graduation ceremony. I think the story deserves to be told in full, she said, including the moment when you give your valedictorian address. That night, Sophia showed me the final draft of her speech. It was powerful, personal, and unapologetically political. She had woven together our personal story with broader themes about military service, single parenthood, and the strength of unconventional families. But the centerpiece was a direct address to me, acknowledging not just my role as her mother but my service as a soldier and leader. Are you sure about this? I asked after reading it. Once you give this speech, there's no taking it back. Your grandparents, your aunt and uncle, they're going to see this as a public rejection of everything they believe about family. Mom, Sophia said, looking at me with eyes that seemed far older than her 18 years. They rejected us first. They rejected us every time they minimized your achievements, every time they suggested that your service didn't matter, every time they made you feel like you had to choose between being a good soldier and being a good mother. She stood up and crossed to her window, looking out at the German countryside that had been our home for the past 3 years. I've spent my whole life watching you prove that their choice was false. You didn't have to choose. You could be both. And not only could you be both, you could excel at both. I'm living proof of that. She turned back to me and her voice was steady and sure. It's time the world knew that too. The morning of graduation, I woke up to find that the Stars and Stripes story had been published online. The headline read, "From Single Mom to General, a Military Family's Story of Service and Sacrifice." Below it was a photo of Sophia and I at her high school award ceremony, both of us in formal attire, both of us smiling with the kind of pride that comes from earned achievement. My phone started ringing immediately. Fellow officers called to congratulate me, to tell me how proud they were to serve alongside me. Military wives reach out to share their own stories of balancing service and family, former colleagues expressing support and admiration for both Sophia and me. But there were no calls from California, no acknowledgement from my family that the story existed. As I got dressed for the graduation ceremony, putting on my dress uniform and carefully arranging my ribbons and decorations, I realized that for the first time in my adult life, I wasn't hoping for their approval. I wasn't wondering if they would finally understand or appreciate what I had accomplished. I was simply prepared to be present for my daughter's moment of triumph, wearing my uniform with pride, representing not just my own service but the example I had set for her. What I didn't know was that Sophia had arranged one more surprise, something that would turn her graduation from a personal celebration into a moment that neither of us would ever forget. What I didn't know was that my family's rejection had set in motion a chain of events that would change everything. While I was dealing with the pain of their ultimatum, Sophia was quietly orchestrating something that would expose the truth about our lives in ways I never could have imagined. It started with a phone call I wasn't supposed to overhear. I was in my home office, finishing up some paperwork for an upcoming NATO exercise, when I heard Sophia on the phone in her room. Her voice was unusually formal, and something in her tone made me pause. "Yes, sir, I understand the protocol," she was saying. "But I think you should know what's really been happening. My mother doesn't talk about it because she's too proud, but I think people should understand what military families actually sacrifice." I moved closer to her door, curious about who she was speaking to with such serious formality. She's never missed a parent-teacher conference, even when she had to attend by video call from a forward operating base in Afghanistan. She's never missed a birthday, even when she had to celebrate by sending a care package with my favorite cookies from 7,000 miles away. And sir, she's never once made me feel like her career was more important than I was. There was a long pause and I could hear her voice growing stronger, more passionate. What I'm asking for isn't a favor. It's recognition of something that should have been recognized a long time ago. My mother has served this country for 22 years, while raising me as a single parent. She's commanded troops in combat while helping me with algebra homework over satellite phone. She's been promoted to Brigadier General while never missing a single important moment in my life. Brigadier General. My heart stopped. I had received confirmation of my promotion just a week earlier, but it hadn't been announced yet. The ceremony was scheduled for after graduation, and I hadn't even told Sophia about the new rank. How did she know? "Yes, sir," she continued. "I believe this story needs to be told. Not just for my mother, but for all the military parents who sacrifice every day while their children watch and learn what real service looks like." When she hung up, I knocked softly on her door. She looked up from her desk, where she had been working on what appeared to be her valedictorian speech, and her expression was both guilty and determined. "Mom, I need to tell you something," she said. "Sophia, who were you just talking to?" She took a deep breath. "A reporter from Stars and Stripes. And before you get upset, please let me explain. Stars and Stripes was the military newspaper, read by service members and their families around the world. The idea that our personal story might be featured there made me feel exposed and vulnerable in ways that combat never had. How do you even know about my promotion?" I asked, sitting on the edge of her bed. "Mrs. Henderson in the admin office is married to Colonel Henderson from your command," Sophia said with a slight smile. "Military communities aren't that big, Mom. When a single mother gets promoted to general, people notice. They talk about it. They're proud of it." She was right. The military community had been quietly celebrating my promotion in ways my biological family never had. Fellow officers' wives had been sending congratulations. Other military children had been telling Sophia how cool it was that her mom was becoming a general. The base community that had raised us both was treating this achievement as the major milestone it was. "But why did you call a reporter?" I asked. Sophia's expression grew serious. "Because I'm valedictorian, Mom. I have to give a speech at graduation. And I've been thinking about what I want to say, about what message I want to leave with my classmates and their families." She pulled out a notebook filled with handwritten pages. Most valedictorian speeches talk about the future, about dreams and potential and all the things we might accomplish. But I want to talk about something different. I want to talk about the heroes who are already sitting in the audience, the parents who've served while raising us, the mothers and fathers who've shown us what sacrifice and dedication really look like. I felt my throat tighten as she continued. "I want to talk about you, Mom, specifically you. Not as my mother, but as an example of what's possible when someone chooses both service and family, when someone refuses to accept that you can't have both excellence in your career and excellence as a parent. Sophia," I said quietly, "our family is going to see this. If this story runs in Stars and Stripes, if you give a speech like that, they're going to know exactly what you're saying about them." "Good," she said, and there was steel in her voice that reminded me of myself. "Maybe it's time someone told the truth about what we've actually accomplished together. Maybe it's time someone pointed out that their definition of good mothering is pretty narrow, if it doesn't include raising a daughter who got into Harvard while serving her country with honor." Over the next few days, I watched Sophia work on her speech with an intensity I had never seen before. She researched statistics about military families, about single mothers in the armed forces, about the challenges and achievements of children who grew up in military communities. She interviewed other students whose parents had served, collecting stories of sacrifice and strength that painted a picture of military life that was far more complex and beautiful than the narrative my family had always pushed. She also did something that surprised me. She reached out to my former colleagues and commanding officers, asking them to share their perspectives on my service and leadership. She contacted Major Patricia Yamamoto, who had served under my command in Afghanistan. She spoke with Colonel James Wright, who had been my mentor during my early years as a field officer. She even managed to get in touch with General Susan Morrison, who had been one of the few female generals in the Army when I was coming up through the ranks. "I want people to understand," Sophia explained when I asked her why she was going to such lengths, "that when you chose military service you weren't abandoning motherhood. You were showing me what motherhood could look like when it's combined with purpose and principle." The reporter from Stars and Stripes, Staff Sergeant Maria Lopez, came to interview us 3 days before graduation. She was a young journalist who had grown up as a military child herself, and she understood immediately what Sophia was trying to accomplish. "This is really about redefining success in military families," she said after hearing our story. "So often the narrative is about what military children lose or miss out on. But your daughter is talking about what she's gained." The interview process was emotional for both of us. Sophia spoke eloquently about the lessons she had learned from watching me balance command responsibilities with parenting. She talked about the strength she had developed from moving frequently, the independence she had gained from having to adapt to new situations, and the global perspective she had acquired from living in different countries. But it was when Staff Sergeant Lopez asked about our current situation with my family that the full scope of what we were dealing with became clear. "They see my mother's career as a series of selfish choices," Sophia said simply. "They've never understood that serving your country while raising a family isn't selfish. It's actually the opposite. It's showing your child that there are things worth sacrificing for, causes worth dedicating your life to, principles worth upholding, even when it's difficult." "And now they're not coming to your graduation?" Lopez asked. "They were never really coming," Sophia replied. "They've been absent for most of the important moments in our lives. The only difference now is that they're being honest about it." After the interview, Lopez asked if she could attend the graduation ceremony. "I think this story deserves to be told in full," she said, "including the moment when you give your valedictorian address." That night, Sophia showed me the final draft of her speech. It was powerful, personal, and unapologetically political. She had woven together our personal story with broader themes about military service, single parenthood, and the strength of unconventional families. But the centerpiece was a direct address to me, acknowledging not just my role as her mother but my service as a soldier and leader. "Are you sure about this?" I asked after reading it. "Once you give this speech, there's no taking it back. Your grandparents, your aunt and uncle, they're going to see this as a public rejection of everything they believe about family." "Mom," Sophia said, looking at me with eyes that seemed far older than her 18 years, "they rejected us first. They rejected us every time they minimized your achievements, every time they suggested that your service didn't matter, every time they made you feel like you had to choose between being a good soldier and being a good mother." She stood up and crossed to her window, looking out at the German countryside that had been our home for the past 3 years. "I've spent my whole life watching you prove that their choice was false. You didn't have to choose, you could be both. And not only could you be both, you could excel at both. I'm living proof of that." She turned back to me, and her voice was steady and sure. It's time the world knew that, too. The morning of graduation, I woke up to find that the Stars and Stripes story had been published online. The headline read, "From Single Mom to General, a military family's story of service and sacrifice." Below it was a photo of Sophia and I at her high school awards ceremony, both of us in formal attire, both of us smiling with the kind of pride that comes from earned achievement. My phone started ringing immediately. Fellow officers called to congratulate me, to tell me how proud they were to serve alongside me. Military wives reach out to share their own stories of balancing service and family. Former colleagues expressing support and admiration for both Sophia and me. But there were no calls from California, no acknowledgement from my family that the story existed. As I got dressed for the graduation ceremony, putting on my dress uniform and carefully arranging my ribbons and decorations, I realized that for the first time in my adult life, I wasn't hoping for their approval. I wasn't wondering if they would finally understand or appreciate what I had accomplished. I was simply prepared to be present for my daughter's moment of triumph, wearing my uniform with pride, representing not just my own service but the example I had set for her. What I didn't know is that Sophia had arranged one more surprise, something that would turn her graduation from a personal celebration into a moment that neither of us would ever forget. Graduation morning dawned clear and bright in Stuttgart. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, adjusting the ribbons on my dress uniform for the third time, my hands trembling slightly with nerves I hadn't felt since my first combat deployment. Today wasn't about facing enemy fire or making life-and-death decisions in a war zone. Today was about watching my daughter graduate as valedictorian, while knowing that the people who should have been proudest of us both had chosen to be absent. Sophia appeared in my doorway, radiant in her cap and gown, her valedictorian cord draped around her neck like a badge of honor. But it was what she was holding that stopped me cold. "Mom," she said softly, "I have something for you." In her hands was a small jewelry box, the kind that holds something precious and meaningful. She opened it to reveal a simple gold locket, engraved with words I had to read twice to believe. "To General Mom, from your proudest achievement, -S." "Sophia," I whispered, my voice catching. "I know Grandma and Grandpa won't be there today," she said, fastening the locket around my neck with careful fingers. "I know Aunt Carmen and Uncle Diego won't be in the audience to see me graduate. But I need you to know something, Mom. I need you to understand that their absence doesn't make this day smaller or less meaningful, it just makes it more honest." I touched the locket, feeling its weight against my chest. "What do you mean?" "I mean that today, for the first time, the people in the audience are going to be the people who actually matter. The people who've supported us, who've understood what we were trying to build together, who've seen the truth about our life instead of judging us for not fitting into someone else's idea of what a family should look like." As we drove to the school, I noticed that the parking lot was fuller than I had expected for a small overseas graduation ceremony. Military families typically kept these events intimate, with only immediate family and close friends in attendance. But as we walked toward the auditorium, I saw faces I recognized from throughout my career. Colonel Martinez from my Pentagon assignment, Major Thompson from Fort Campbell. even retired Command Sergeant Major Jackson, who had mentored me when I was a young lieutenant. "Sophia," I said, stopping in the hallway, "what did you do?" She smiled with the same mischievous expression she'd worn as a child, when she was particularly proud of a surprise she'd orchestrated. "I may have mentioned to a few people that my mother was being honored today," she said. "And I may have suggested that anyone who wanted to see what military excellence actually looks like in action should probably be here." Before I could respond, Colonel Martinez approached us, his wife at his side. "General Torres," he said, offering a crisp salute despite being in civilian clothes, "we wouldn't miss this for the world. Your daughter has been telling anyone who will listen about the leader you've been and the mother you've been. It's about time someone recognized that those two roles aren't contradictory." Mrs. Martinez hugged me warmly. "That article in Stars and Stripes made me cry," she said. "My own kids need to hear stories like yours. They need to understand that military service and family devotion can strengthen each other." As we took our seats in the auditorium, I realized that Sophia had created something extraordinary. The audience was filled with military families, but also with German neighbors who had watched us become part of their community, with teachers and administrators who had witnessed Sophia's academic achievements, and with fellow service members who understood the unique challenges and rewards of military life. The ceremony began with the traditional processional, and I watched with swelling pride as Sophia walked across the stage with her classmates. But it was when the principal introduced her as valedictorian that I felt the full weight of what we had accomplished together. "Ladies and gentlemen," Principal Roberts announced, "our valedictorian, Sophia Torres, will be attending Harvard University in the fall on a full academic scholarship, but more importantly, she represents the very best of what American military families can achieve when they combine service to country with dedication to family." The applause was thunderous, and I could see Staff Sergeant Lopez from Stars and Stripes in the back of the auditorium, her camera ready to capture whatever was about to happen. Sophia approached the podium with the confidence I had watched her develop over years of adapting to new schools, new countries, and new challenges. She looked out over the audience, her gaze finding mine in the third row, and she smiled. "Fellow graduates, families, and honored guests," she began, "most valedictorian speeches talk about the future, about the dreams we'll chase and the goals we'll achieve. But today, I want to talk about something that's already been accomplished. I want to talk about the heroes who are sitting in this audience right now." She paused, and I could feel the attention of the entire room focusing with laser intensity. When I was 8 years old, my mother was deployed to Afghanistan. For an entire year, she served in a combat zone while raising me from 7,000 miles away. She attended my school plays via video call from a forward operating base. She helped me with homework over satellite phone while dodging mortar attacks. She sent care packages filled with my favorite books, while leading troops through some of the most dangerous missions of the war. I felt tears pricking my eyes, but I also felt something else, a recognition that Sophia was doing something I had never been able to do for myself. She was telling the truth about our life, without apology or justification. "Some people might say that choosing military service while raising a child is selfish," she continued, and I could hear the challenge in her voice. "Some people might argue that a good mother puts her family first and her career second. To those people, I would like to introduce Brigadier General Rebecca Torres, United States Army." The gasp that went through the audience was audible. I hadn't officially announced my promotion yet, and many people in the room were hearing about it for the first time. "My mother didn't choose between being a good soldier and being a good mother," Sophia said, her voice growing stronger. "She chose to be both. She chose to show me that women can serve their country with honor, while raising children who understand the value of service, sacrifice, and dedication." She gestured toward me, and I felt hundreds of pairs of eyes turning in my direction. "General Torres has commanded troops in combat. She has made life-and-death decisions that have saved American lives and protected American interests. She has been recognized by the highest levels of military leadership for her strategic thinking, her battlefield leadership, and her commitment to excellence." The audience was completely silent now, hanging on every word. But she has also never missed a parent-teacher conference. She has never forgotten a birthday, or a school play, or a tennis match. She has packed my lunch, helped me with college applications, and taught me how to change a tire, all while serving our nation with distinction. Sophia's voice began to crack slightly, and I could see her fighting to maintain her composure. There are people who believe that my mother's career has somehow damaged me, that growing up in a military family has deprived me of something essential. To those people, I would like to point out that I am graduating as valedictorian of my high school class. I will be attending Harvard University on a full academic scholarship. I speak 3 languages fluently. I have lived in 5 countries and 7 states. I have learned to adapt, to be resilient, to find strength in challenge, and beauty in change. She wiped her eyes quickly, then looked directly at me. I am not damaged by my mother's service. I am shaped by it. I am not weakened by her choices. I am strengthened by them. And I am not ashamed of our unconventional family. I am proud of it. The silence in the auditorium was complete, broken only by the sound of people crying softly throughout the audience. So today, as I accept this honor as valedictorian, I want to share it with the woman who taught me that honor is something you earn through service, that strength is something you develop through adversity, and that love is something you demonstrate through sacrifice. Sophia looked directly at me, her voice clear and strong. Thank you, General Mom, for showing me what it means to serve something greater than yourself while never forgetting what matters most. Thank you for proving that a woman can lead troops in battle and still make the world's best chocolate chip cookies. Thank you for teaching me that there is no choice between excellence in your career and excellence in your family. You can have both if you're willing to work for both. She paused one final time, and when she spoke again, her words rang through the auditorium like a bell. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you my mother, my hero, and my example, Brigadier General Rebecca Torres, who has spent 22 years proving that the strongest families are built on shared values, mutual respect, and the courage to be different. The standing ovation began slowly, with Colonel Martinez rising from his seat, then spread like wildfire through the entire auditorium. Military personnel snapped to attention and saluted. Civilian guests applauded with tears streaming down their faces. The German neighbors who had become part of our extended family rose to their feet in recognition of something they had witnessed, but perhaps never fully understood until that moment. I sat there in my uniform, the locket Sophia had given me warm against my chest, overwhelmed by the realization that my daughter had just given me something my own family never had: public recognition that our unconventional life had been not just acceptable but admirable. But the biggest surprise was yet to come. As the applause finally died down and Sophia prepared to return to her seat, Principal Roberts stepped back to the microphone. Before we continue with our ceremony, he announced, I have been asked to read a special message that arrived this morning. He unfolded an official-looking document, and even from my seat in the 3rd row I could see the distinctive letterhead of the Department of Defense. This message comes from General Patricia Hayes, Chief of Staff of the United States Army, he continued, and the audience fell completely silent. I felt my heart stop. General Hayes was the highest-ranking officer in the Army, a woman whose career had paved the way for officers like me. To Brigadier General Rebecca Torres and her daughter Sophia, it is my honor to recognize a military family that exemplifies the very best of American values. General Torres, your service to our nation has been exemplary, but your service to your family has been inspirational. Sophia, your achievements reflect not only your own excellence but the strength of the values instilled in you by a mother who chose to serve both country and family with equal dedication. To the Torres family, you represent the future of American military excellence. Congratulations on this well-deserved recognition. The second standing ovation was even longer than the first, and this time I couldn't help the tears that streamed down my face. In one morning, in one speech, in one moment of truth, my daughter had transformed our story from one of family rejection to one of national recognition. As the ceremony concluded and we prepared to leave the auditorium, I realized that something fundamental had shifted. We were no longer the outcasts of the Torres family, the ones who had chosen the wrong path. We were the Torres family that had chosen service, sacrifice, and strength. We were the family that had proven love could thrive in unconventional circumstances. And for the first time in my adult life, I was completely, unapologetically proud of the choices we had made together. The hours immediately following graduation were a whirlwind of congratulations, photographs, and conversations with people who had been touched by Sophia's speech. But it was the phone calls that began arriving that afternoon that truly showed me how far our story had traveled. The first came from Marcus, calling from his current assignment in South Korea. His voice was thick with emotion when he spoke. "Rebecca, I just watched the video online," he said. "I know we didn't make it as a married couple, but I need you to know something. Watching Sophia today, listening to her talk about the woman you've become and the mother you've been, I've never been more proud to have been part of your story, even briefly." He paused, and I could hear him struggling to find the right words. "I always knew you were an exceptional officer. What I didn't fully appreciate was how exceptional you were as a mother. Sophia is living proof that you didn't have to choose between service and family. You found a way to excel at both." The second call came from Command Sergeant Major Jackson, the gruff mentor who had shaped my early career. "Torres," he said in his characteristic, direct style, "I've been in the Army for 32 years. I've seen a lot of soldiers, a lot of leaders, a lot of people trying to balance service with personal life. What that young lady said about you today, that was the finest tribute to military leadership I've ever witnessed." His voice softened, which was unusual for a man who had built his reputation on being tough as nails. "You didn't just raise a daughter while serving your country. You raised a daughter who understands what service means, who appreciates sacrifice, who knows the difference between strength and stubbornness. That girl isn't just your achievement, Rebecca. She's a testament to what's possible when we stop making false choices between professional excellence and personal devotion." But it was the third call that changed everything. Sophia and I were sitting on our small apartment balcony, sharing a quiet dinner and processing the emotional intensity of the day, when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was familiar: California. "Rebecca?" The voice was tentative, uncertain. It was my younger brother Diego. "Diego?" I said, surprised. "I didn't expect to hear from you." I saw the video," he said quietly. "Carmen shared it in the family group chat. Mom and Dad saw it too." I felt my stomach tighten. "And?" There was a long pause, filled with the kind of silence that carries weight. "And I need to apologize," he said finally. "We all do. But I'm calling because I'm a firefighter, Rebecca. I know what it means to serve, to put your life on the line for strangers, to choose a career that's about something bigger than yourself. And I've spent years watching you do that while I did nothing to support you." His voice grew stronger as he continued. "When I heard Sophia talking about the woman you've become, about the mother you've been, about the leader you are, I realized that I've been proud of you for years and never had the courage to say it. I've been telling people at the station about my sister who's a general in the Army, but I've never told you how much I respect what you've accomplished." "Diego," I said softly, not sure where this conversation was going. "No, let me finish," he said. "I need to say this. What we did to you, what we said about you, the way we treated your career, like it was some kind of betrayal of family values. It was wrong. It was small and narrow-minded and cruel." I could hear him taking a shaky breath. "You didn't abandon your family when you joined the military. You showed us what family could look like when it's built on principles, instead of just proximity. You raised a daughter who's going to Harvard while serving your country with honor. You became a general while never missing the moments that mattered to your child. And instead of celebrating that, instead of being proud of you, we punished you for not fitting into the box we built for you." Tears were streaming down my face, and I could see Sophia watching me with concern from across the table. "I don't know if you can forgive us," Diego continued. "I don't know if you should forgive us, but I need you to know that today, watching that video, I finally understood what we lost when we chose to reject you instead of trying to understand you." "What do you mean?" I asked. "I mean, we lost the chance to learn from you. We lost the chance to see what courage really looks like. We lost the chance to watch our sister become one of the most senior leaders in the United States military, while raising a daughter who embodies everything we claim to value about family." He paused again, and when he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Carmen's kids, my kids, They're growing up thinking that success means staying safe, staying close, staying the same. But Sophia is growing up knowing that success means serving something greater than yourself, while never forgetting what matters most. Which lesson do you think is going to serve them better in life? I couldn't speak. The conversation I had imagined having with my family for years was finally happening. But it was coming from the brother who had always been the quietest, the one who followed rather than led. Rebecca, Diego said, I know it's too late for graduation. I know we can't undo the years of silence and rejection. But if there's any chance that you might be willing to let us try to rebuild something, to let us try to be the family we should have been all along, I'm hoping you might consider it. Before I could respond, he continued, because the truth is, we need you more than you need us. We need to learn how to be proud of difficult choices. We need to understand how to support people we love even when their lives don't look like what we expected. We need to see what real strength looks like. After I hung up the phone, Sophia and I sat in silence for a long time, watching the German sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. Are you going to call them back? She asked finally. I considered the question carefully. For so many years, I had wanted nothing more than their acceptance, their approval, their recognition that my life had value and meaning. But now, having built something beautiful and strong without their support, I wasn't sure what role they could play in the life we had created. I don't know, I said honestly. What do you think? Sophia was quiet for a moment, then smiled with the wisdom that had carried her through 18 years of being a military child. I think, she said slowly, that we've proven we don't need their approval to be happy, but maybe that means we can afford to be generous. Maybe we can show them the same grace you've shown me all these years. The grace to grow, to change, to become better than we were before. The next morning brought more calls. Carmen, tearful and apologetic, admitting that she had been threatened by my success because it challenged her assumptions about what motherhood should look like. My father, gruff but sincere, acknowledging that he had never understood military service because he had never tried to understand it. But it was my mother's call that came at the end of the day, as Sophia and I were packing for our return trip to the United States, that carried the most weight. Rebecca, she said, and her voice was different than I had ever heard it, smaller, more uncertain. Mom. I watched the video of Sophia's speech, she said. I watched it 17 times. And each time, I understood more clearly how wrong I've been about you, about your life, about the choices you've made. I waited, not sure what to expect. I spent so many years worrying that you weren't being a good mother, because you weren't being the kind of mother I was. I never stopped to consider that maybe you were being a better mother than I was. Maybe you were showing Sophia things I never could have shown my children. Her voice cracked slightly. When I heard her talk about your strength, your courage, your dedication, when I heard her describe the woman you've become, I realized that I don't know you at all. I've spent 20 years judging someone I never took the time to understand. Mom, I said softly, it's not too late to understand now. Isn't it? She asked. Haven't I lost the right to be proud of you after spending so many years making you feel like you should be ashamed? The question hung between us, heavy with years of pain and misunderstanding. Maybe, I said carefully, the question isn't whether you have the right to be proud. Maybe the question is whether you're willing to do the work to understand who we really are, what we've really built together. There was a long silence then. I would like to try, if you'll let me. As I hung up the phone, I realized that Sophia's graduation speech had accomplished something I never could have managed on my own. It had forced my family to confront the truth about our lives, to see past their assumptions and prejudices to the reality of what we had achieved together. The girl who had been banned from her graduation by a family who saw her as a failure had become the young woman whose valedictorian speech transformed family rejection into family reconciliation. But the most important truth was this. We no longer needed their approval to know our worth. We had found our strength in each other, our pride in our achievements, our peace in the choices we had made. Whether they chose to be part of our future was up to them, but our future, bright, challenging, and full of possibility, was already assured. 2 months after graduation, I stood in the Pentagon courtyard for my official promotion ceremony to Brigadier General. The morning was crisp and clear, and the flags snapped smartly in the autumn breeze. But this time, the audience looked different than any military ceremony I had ever experienced. Sophia sat in the front row, radiant in her Harvard sweatshirt, having taken a break from her freshman orientation to be here. Beside her sat Marcus, who had flown in from Korea specifically for this moment. My military family was there in full force, colleagues, mentors, and soldiers I had served alongside for over 2 decades. But in the third row, looking slightly out of place but determinedly present, sat my parents, Diego and Carmen with her family. They had flown across the country, not because they suddenly understood military protocol or because they had developed an appreciation for Army traditions, but because they were finally trying to understand me. The ceremony was formal and moving. General Hayes herself administered the oath and pinned the single star to my uniform. As she spoke about leadership, service, and the responsibility that comes with senior command, I found myself thinking not about the rank I was receiving, but about the journey that had brought me to this moment. After the ceremony, there was a small reception. I watched my parents navigate conversations with military personnel, clearly uncomfortable but making an effort. My mother spent 20 minutes talking with Major Yamamoto about life as a military spouse, asking questions I had never heard her ask before. My father stood quietly beside Diego as they listened to Command Sergeant Major Jackson explain what it meant to serve under my command. Carmen approached me as the reception was winding down, holding her youngest daughter's hand. "Rebecca," she said hesitantly, "Emma has been asking about her Aunt Rebecca, who's a general. She wants to know if women can really be soldiers." I knelt down to Emma's level, this little niece I barely knew, and saw myself at her age, curious, questioning, drawn to possibilities that others might not understand. "Women can be anything they choose to be," I told her. "Soldiers, generals, doctors, teachers, mothers, sometimes all at once." Emma's eyes lit up. "Can I be a general too?" "If you work hard and serve others, you can be anything you want." As families began to leave, my mother lingered, clearly wanting to say something but struggling to find the words. "I brought something for you," she said finally, pulling a small wrapped package from her purse. Inside was a photo I had never seen before. Me at age 7, wearing my grandfather's old army jacket, standing at attention in our backyard with a wooden sword at my side. On the back, in my mother's handwriting, were the words, "Rebecca, age 7, always marching to her own drum." "I found this last week while cleaning out old photo albums," she said. I had forgotten that even as a little girl, you knew what you wanted to be. I should have seen it then. I should have supported it then." I hugged her, and for the first time in decades, it felt genuine. That evening, Sophia and I walked around the monuments in Washington, D.C., as we had done so many times during our years stationed here. But this time felt different. This time felt like completion rather than transition. "Are you happy with how everything turned out?" Sophia asked as we stood before the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. I considered the question carefully. The family relationships that had been rebuilt were tentative, fragile, requiring patience and continued effort from all sides. There would be awkward conversations, cultural differences that might never fully bridge, and moments when old patterns of misunderstanding would resurface. "I'm happy that we stayed true to ourselves," I said finally. "I'm happy that we built something strong together, regardless of whether anyone else understood it. The reconciliation with your grandparents and aunt and uncle is a bonus, but it's not what made us whole." "What made us whole?" she asked. "Choosing each other every day through every challenge, choosing service over safety, choosing growth over comfort, choosing to be proud of who we became instead of apologizing for who we weren't." 6 months later, I received an invitation that perfectly captured how much had changed. Carmen was organizing a family reunion, and the invitation read, "Come celebrate the Torres family, all of us, exactly as we are." At that reunion, my parents met some of my military colleagues who had become extended family. Diego's children got to see what their aunt's uniform meant, what her medals represented. Carmen's daughter Emma announced that she wanted to apply to West Point someday. But the most meaningful moment came when my mother stood up during dinner and raised her glass. "To Rebecca and Sophia," she said, her voice steady and clear, "for showing us that there are many ways to love, many ways to serve, many ways to be a family. We lost years because we couldn't see past our own expectations to appreciate the extraordinary life you built together. We won't make that mistake again." Today, Sophia is thriving at Harvard, double majoring in international relations and military history. She calls me every Sunday, not because she has to, but because she wants to. We've built something that distance can't diminish, something that skepticism couldn't destroy. I continue to serve, now as a general officer, leading thousands of soldiers, while never forgetting the most important lesson my daughter taught me: that strength comes not from choosing between service and family, but from choosing both with equal commitment. My family still doesn't fully understand the military life, but they no longer see it as a threat to be overcome. They see it as part of who we are, part of what made us strong. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't proving others wrong. Sometimes it's building something so beautiful, so strong, so undeniably good, that even those who doubted you have no choice but to see the truth. Sophia and I did exactly that, together. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.